for you. So my first question for you is maybe can you describe how it was to build the first eco hotel in Shanghai back then, and maybe what has changed? What were the challenges that you encountered when you started, and how has the mindset or the infrastructure changed in China?
Yeah, these are, hey, there he is. Good to see you. These are huge questions, so I'm trying to figure out how to answer in a focused format that doesn't take half a day. Yes. First, kudos on dragging those videos out of the dust. I haven't seen those in a while, and I think they're case in point. You know, that TED Talk was done, I can't remember, maybe 2012, at least 10 years ago, and it was talking about work that had been done for 5, 6, 7 years prior to that. So what's being showed there is like at least 15 years old, which is kind of right on cue with your question. I mean, the world has changed a lot since then in a good way. And I loved Sename's video because it's endemic to pretty much everything the way we've started as well, and that everybody starts. Like, the only way to start is by doing stuff yourself somewhere, and then building upon that. So when I got to China in 2002, where green building did not exist as a topic, it took us 5 years of just trial and error, getting our hands dirty, very much similar to Sename's video, but in a slightly different context, but same idea, really all hands in, to build a base of knowledge, to then even be able to build what was essentially the first carbon neutral hotel in Asia, if not the world, by 2007, 2008. And it wasn't overly difficult because we'd been very focused on that topic for 5-6 years, building the know-how. What was difficult was sort of the infrastructure around it. Carbon neutrality was such a new topic. Like, how would we do it? How would we create offsets? How would we do the accounting? It was like saying I'm the first guy who's put a toilet into a building, and people go, well, who cares? It's like, no, you don't understand. There's no sewage system for the toilet underneath. Like, you need to create the whole sewage system just to get to the toilet functioning. So it's all of that infrastructure work that was the real challenging piece, and which has changed now. I look today on, we're just finishing a project right now where we're getting ready to certify about 2 million square meters a year of carbon neutral offices. And we're working with the China Carbon Exchange Center to do that. The standard that we've developed is looking like it's going to be the first to be accepted for embodied carbon calculations. And that's kind of a dream come true. Like, these topics didn't exist. Conversation back then, there was no infrastructure and so on. And that's not just China. China is actually way ahead of the rest of the world, but globally. And now today, that infrastructure exists. We can do it at much larger scale, and so that makes people like me very, very hopeful. But it's night and day. It's like, the 2007, 2008 when we did the first carbon neutral hotel, to today, it's like 2 different lives, 2 different realities.
Thanks so much. That's amazing. So you are a foreign architect in China, but not only you come and you build some buildings, but you are also building resources for other architects and urban planners. What do you think is the role of China in this transition towards green cities?
God.
Another big question.
Yeah, another big question. In many ways, I have, I'm Canadian, French Canadian. My roots are New Zealand. I work in India. I work in Europe. I work along many places. But the place where I have the most hope actually is China. Just in terms of playing a role in steering things as large as citywide topics. So the role, without question, is to help put in that infrastructure to allow for innovation on top. But it requires a long-term vision and long-term planning that most other countries don't have and can't afford to do. And so the role that I think what we're seeing emerge out of China, like, you know, we just a couple months ago, we finished a Starbucks project, which I'm happy to send an article on, where we've been working for 2 years with them on redefining how we do material choices and accounting within their projects. And with this project that we just completed, it's the first time they felt confident enough to communicate the data, where now it's out in the press. This new Greener Left Store lab that we completed in Shanghai is 50% recyclable or biodegradable at the end of its life. So they're aiming for 100% circular, 100% carbon neutral stores. And this is not being done in Seattle, it's being done in Shanghai. And people are similar with this office project that we're completing, where the offices are designed for circularity, they're designed for disassembly, they're not sold, they're leased, so that it ensures the materials come back to the person who's doing the fit out. Like these examples of circular service economies are emerging faster in China than they are in Europe and in other places. And so when we present those examples, people are surprised to see that type of innovation is coming out of Asia, it's coming out of China, and it's faster than Europe, faster than North America. So I use those examples to think that, you know, I think the dynamic has changed, it's changing even more, that we're going to see a leading role for Asia Pacific, China in particular, around the topics of health and sustainability. Partially because there's just so much more construction here. There's such a great need, but partially because the region here has the willingness and capability to put in the necessary infrastructure to make it happen. So we're going to see a lot more innovation coming out of Asia than anywhere else in the world over the next couple decades. Is my humble opinion on that front.
That's amazing. Was I sharing the correct image? So is this the Starbucks that you built in Shanghai?
Correct. It's we've been doing a lot of work with them, redefining how materials are selected and quantified. And this is the first sort of public expression of that work. So this store, as mentioned, it's carbon neutral, and as it's currently 50% recyclable or biodegradable at the end of its life. And by that we mean the percent biodegradability or recyclability of the store is actually higher, but Starbucks is very, very conservative, and I really commend them for that. Because we're looking at materials that can actually be recycled because they have a take back program, or they have they have a viable path to a second life. So it's a ridiculously cool project.
Cool, thanks so much. We're very lucky we have Sename, who actually joined us from Lomé. Thanks so much, Sename, for waking up so early. We're gonna get to ask you as well some questions in a minute. I have one more question for Raefer, and then we will go with Sename. The last question I have for Raefer is Raefer, if you had your way and you could design the whole city of Shanghai exactly the way you wanted to, you know, like perfect sort of green eco way, if we were to close our eyes, could you walk us through how different that city would be in 2100? This is sort of a exercise of the imagination. If we imagine in 2100 and we're walking through the streets of Shanghai, like if it was exactly as you wanted, how would it look like? How would it feel like?
I still hold to the same types of vision as before. It would feel like walking through an urban forest. There, you know, there'd be virtually no cars. Most of the streets would have been turned over to pedestrian urban plots and essentially green rivers, right? Which honestly would be possible in Shanghai given the insane infrastructure that exists. I think we're at metro line number 18. You can move everybody underground and have them pop up wherever. Cars are completely unnecessary. So going through that city for sure would be very, very green and very entirely pedestrian oriented. But you know, just to reimagine the city really would be to set a design challenge, and that's goal based as opposed to prescription based. And at a greater level, if I had to redesign the city, it's like, all right, we need more greenery, as stated before. We need more greenery when we're done than when we started, and we need every building to be designed for disassembly. So that we're thinking about the building at the state of demolition first, and we work backwards from there. I'd set those two guidelines to every architect let loose in the city, and sort of let the city draw itself out from there. But short of just kind of walking around what the city would look like, I think it's easy to say that, yeah, of course it'd be green. But I think more importantly, what are the guidelines that we'd set to get there, and those would be the two primary ones.
And do you think such a goal is achievable? Like, instead of setting a specific standard, is to set sort of objectives? Do you think that's something that in China actually the sort of climate lends itself to such practice?
I think so. I mean, you're obviously speaking to somebody who's biased. I hate prescriptive design standards with passion. And I've spent the past 15, 20 years trying to shift the industry away from prescription to performance-based. Mm-hmm. As you know, we do that with air quality. We do that with a whole bunch of things. Like, I don't care how you get there. Here are the results. We just like, does the project deliver or not? And we're starting to see that shift. We're starting to see the shift where, look, the building needs to be carbon neutral. Leave it up to the innovation of the architects and the engineers. That's what they do, how to get there, but as opposed to giving people a very prescriptive path on how to get there. And we are starting to see that shift in just even the 14th five-year plan, the government regulations coming out saying, look, waste, we need to cut waste by 75%. We need to be carbon zero. We're going to prioritize modular construction to achieve both, but open field on how people get there. It's like, let people innovate to get there. So we're starting to see a shift to, here are the targets. And, you know, the carbon zero goal of 2060 is exactly that. It's like, here's the target. And now we're seeing the different companies that we're working with innovating hard and fast to get to those targets. And that's exactly the behavior that we want, or that I see as the most fruitful, because we need space for as much innovation as possible. And the only way to do that is to set the goal and let people figure out how to get there, as opposed to tell them how to get there.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for sharing this vision of yours. I was checking on your profile, but there are multiple websites. Where should the students go if they want to see more of the type of projects that you do, the type of resource that you build? What are the websites that they should go and check? If you want to type this in the chat, or I can also look them up. Is it Reset, sure, or is it 8300?
Yeah, the one that's probably going to be the most useful is the Reset website, the reset.build website. That's the one that's continues to grow hardest and fastest. And I can type that in.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, so now I'm going to start asking a couple of questions to Sename, and then I'd like you to have just ask each other question, I guess, because you might have different vision. So Sename, before you joined, we actually shared first the video of the transition between the 20 biggest city in the world being mostly in Asia, and by the end of the century, most of them being in Africa. And then I shared the work of Raefer and the first like a carbon neutral hotel in China, and the other work that he's done. And I also shared a video of what you do with Rolabs. So the first thing that Raefer said is actually that the way that he approached developing the carbon neutral hotel in China was exactly like what you've done, is by trying to lead by example and doing some experiments on the ground, getting to build the expertise yourself in your specific anthropological, sociological, material context. So I'm sure you get this question a lot, but what do you think are the biggest? So it's very exciting. Like Lomé is going to become a very big city, a lot of opportunities for the people. But what do you think are the biggest challenge and also the biggest opportunities, in your opinion? What are the things that could go wrong? And what are the things that could be amazing, given that population is growing and people are going to live in cities?
Hello, do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation. Very, very glad to be with you. And your question, Cesar, is a too big question. As you can understand it, the biggest city will be in this continent tomorrow, and
maybe
will be.
Maybe we can reframe it to Lomé. If you want, we can reframe it to Lomé. A bit more specific, because Africa is too big,
yes.
right?
Yes, but it is it is that is the challenge, because Lomé itself did not exist anymore, because you have one biggest city from Lagos to Abidjan, so it will be one unique city, but who will englobe, if you want, like 6 countries, So you have the same city present in six countries. So the city itself will be bigger than each of those countries. So Lomé, as you know it today, will disappear, and you will have a sort of extraordinary entity for which you need to develop new way of managing, because each of those countries will not be able itself to manage the, what we will face. So it's a lot, because our system of borders are not, didn't have any anthropological reality. Those are colonial subdivision, yes. So the first issue is that Lomé and Lagos and Ghana and all those capitals we know right now, they did not exist anymore. So we can ever talk about, I can talk about the future of city of Lomé, because Lomé will not exist anymore, and we will have the same city. We will be the junction of all the capitals we have at the border of this Gulf of Guinea area.
So there's, I guess, like something that you sort of anticipate will happen, which is like a sort of a negative scenario, and then there's what you want to do, which is what is different. How big is the difference between your vision of the city and what you see is happening?
Yeah. So what we will face, it's not anyone is not able to anticipate it. You have to be modest and assume that you can anticipate these things, because what we are talking about is the till 2050, the population of the continent will double, and you will have 1 human on 4 who will live in Africa and 1 human on 6 who will live in African cities. So any strategy, any project you can try to develop today to address the problematic of this quite extraordinary urbanization, you don't have any guarantee that it will work. So what we decided to do with some of the projects we are developing right now is not be focused on anticipating and not try to build solutions who will work, but build people who will be able, whatever the problem is tomorrow, to find solution. So most working on education, empowering people, than develop solution who can face such an extraordinary situation that they can't ever work.
Right. My next question is sort of to trying to create the bridge, if you will, between the two of your narrative. So I remember in the presentation you mentioned that you do not want Togo or the other African countries to import like a ready-made Silicon Valley or Chinese model. But what are there still some things that you think are valuable that are being done in other places? And what are the things that you think are different in the African context that can be fundamentally different in the African context or in the Togolese context?
I try to work a lot on digital revolution and the relation you can have between cities and digital revolution. And it is a lot because those big techs, those Facebook, Google, already see what I'm talking about and are prepared to tackle the African market like the biggest market tomorrow. And we have right now a lot of smart city projects which emerge those 10 years. Each country in Africa have these gadgets of smart city right now. But what I'm saying is that with the cities we will have, transform them in a smart city is to give too much power to those big tech, because you will have cities who will be like bigger than our own country. So the people who control the city will control all the continent, and it can be a way to go to a new imperialism, a new colonialism for this continent. And what I try to do is to say that it is not, the decision is not to not build smart cities, but we should find a way to use technology in cities without giving all the power on the cities to the American Silicon Valley company, or even China company. So the idea is to take the technology itself, and I find the technology, if it is not yet used in innovation laboratory of those big companies, like something who are very close to African way of living. Those technology are distributive, those digital technology are peer-to-peer technology, and you have a lot of similarity between the technology itself taken at the sources and our African tradition. So the idea is to take the technology at the source, but put them in a quite different innovation laboratory, which is not Silicon Valley Innovation Laboratory, but put them in new type of laboratory, which are a collective laboratory, and see what will be the device we could develop if those technology are not oriented to the profit or to the market, but at the service of people. So we launched this alternative smart city project we call UpCity, and the idea is to create a network of social laboratory in the city, which should be able to take the technology at the sources, transform them to new solutions, new devices close to the reality of people. And each of those laboratories have the contract to transform a closed area of 1 kilometer around in a smart city. And by replicating those laboratories all over the city, you can have a smart city, but by using small scale, because the issue of the technology is the scale. When you want to develop technology at the big scale, you are dependent on big tech, GAFA, Facebook, Google, etc. But if the scale is 1 kilometer around and unique laboratory, you can develop from this laboratory all the technology who can change your neighborhoods in a smart city, and you could choose that all those technology are not for sale, but owned by the people itself who develop them, etc.
So this is a great vision where you see, I think, like very grassroots and very sort of like many localized, but are still connected. So we often talk about, how, because, how China is like becoming more and more present in Africa. And you just also mentioned that we do not want to replicate the colonial model. Are there things, innovation that are in Africa that you think could be exported and brought to China, actually? Because I think we always think like this is only going in one way. Like, are there things that you think that you guys are doing that you think could be a very attractive model for China? And I will ask the reciprocal question after to Raefer to see like what sort of transfer can be done both ways.
Yes, I think the very highest technology we have in the world right now, not only in Africa, is traditional society social structure. It is a very complex technology. And what people can create link between them, those type of responsibility and connection with their environment, traditional society developed are a very high technology. And what I'm saying is that, and it is very close if you explore them, it's very close to the new digital technology. The new digital technology seems to be making a return to very traditional way of doing things by all this capacity to connect everybody, to put everything on the eyes of everybody, this collaboration way of doing things. So for a long time, technology have as a model traditional social structure, and at some point technology decided to didn't use social structure as model anymore, but to become itself a social structure. And that is maybe the problem with digital technology today. And what Africa can give to the world, because Africa still have very complex traditional structure, traditional social structure, is to prove that you can have very high digital technology today without trying to, I don't know how to say, écraser.
Squash.
Yes. Traditional structure, traditional social structure, but put the digital technology at a structure who can be like a good calc, a good layer. Yes, a layer who can fit very perfectly with traditional structure? What is not the dynamic right now of the technology when it's going to the innovation laboratory? Because innovation laboratory are not focused on put technology as a layer on social structure, but use technology to create new way of social structure so that you abandon your social structure and use technology. Because the social structure itself is so powerful that if your social structure is strong, you don't need anymore to pay devices, to use platform. You can connect yourself, help, ask another one to do things for you. You don't need to go on a platform if everybody in the neighborhood know itself and know how you can need, etc., etc. So what are the very new technology we can develop? We don't have this this tendency to erase all the social structure. I think it is the challenge we need to address, and Africa can help for that, because Africa still have a very traditional social, strong, distributive traditional structure.
Thanks so much. I'd like Raefer to maybe respond to that. So you're mentioning, Raefer, that you work a lot on performance, but is this sort of social performance one of the criteria as well?
I mean, Sename is sort of touching on one of the toughest and most important topics there. And first, I couldn't agree more with everything that he's just said. And it's one of the, you know, as human animals, like we don't even study ourselves enough. And so understanding the just social dynamics is something we don't do enough of. I mean, human groups fall apart after 200 people. You just can't know more than 200 people well in a special circle. And this is where when we look at tech, it's similar but different, where these tech has been currently, the way tech has evolved is overconnection, right? We're completely overconnected. The brain hasn't developed. We haven't socially, like we're not built to process this much information on a daily basis. And figuring out how to redesign small as opposed to big, as how to make smaller, higher quality networks, to me is the #1 priority. And the difference is just in the level of application, right? And so if you look at a country like China, where the densities are so high, where you need all these layers of structure, right? At the core, you need
energy and transport.
You need the small nucleus of maximum 200 sort of village-like structure, and all the way up to central government. How you create those tiers is the crux of the challenge. And we've noticed whenever we're doing successful projects, it's because it's a small group of people who know each other, who trust each other, and who are able to pull that project off. And then how do you replicate that success a million times over? Needs to exist in a sort of overall framework that supports that, right? So this is where the sociological aspect to how we deliver tech is absolutely critical, and very few people are researching that. But when we set these performance targets, it's like what we realize is the ones that succeed, the ones that do well, are the ones that are small nucleuses of people who trust each other and work very closely together. Making that shift is obviously very challenging. But there is a social structure to me that exists in Asia that to me presents some of those opportunities. You know, having grown up in the West, family structure, that core nucleus structure, is stronger in Asia than it exists in a lot of the West, in particular North America. And those are the certain ties that I'd leverage to look at how we bring tech to empower that as opposed to destroy it, as it has for the most part. But I mean, that's beyond sort of architecture. That's talking culture, high density networks within cities and how you deploy. I think, you know, to thrive, to survive, we're going to have to get there. Couldn't agree more with Sename, and we're just going to make a ton of mistakes along the way before a few people manage to successfully get there.
Thanks so much. We have a lot of questions from the students, so I invite the speakers to look into the chats and sort of pick up the question that you want. And also, I always let the students, if they are really passionate and they have a burning question, I let them as well just you know, activate the microphone and the video and ask you a question directly. So is there a question that you see that you want to answer, or are there students that have burning questions that they want to ask? Please go ahead.
There's I've had the luxury of reading some of the questions, and I was trying to figure out how to answer direct to some questions, and I'm not smart enough to do that. Kind of looking for some WeChat functionality in this Zoom call, which I can't find. But in any case, so maybe while Sename reads, you know, we spent the beginning of the call on carbon, and there's a question here about other ESG related topics. And I think we have, just to try to put it in the students' context, we have groups like Hanglong and Swire and people like this who come to us every other week and say, hey, Raefer, can you suggest low carbon materials? And I always have to go, oh, Christ, that question again. It's like, look, can we please take a step back? That's not how it works. The best way to get to low carbon is through circularity. So can we talk about circularity first? Whoa, hang on, I'm here to talk about low carbon. Why are you talking about circularity? And these topics, they're indivisible. They're hard to split up. So yes, we talk about carbon neutrality as sort of a tip of spear because there's a lot of focus on that right now, but it's more of an entry point to get into the other topics that make it possible. You can't talk about carbon without circularity. You can't talk about circularity without dealing with health, right? Because health is the first thing that kills circularity. And once you get into these topics, you realize how interwoven they are and how important it is to become an expert at these topics to be able to see them all holistically and be able to address, I'm addressing carbon without being the expense of circularity and health. So I appreciate that question that was put out there related to ESG, because I tend to skip, like that has become so ingrained in a lot of the work that we do. It's built in. When we talk about things like carbon, de facto, it's dragging along and assuming all the other pieces that are critical to making carbon happen.
Thank you. Maybe I'll point a question to Sename. Do you think it's possible for Africa to solve their social and economic challenges while sustaining the growth? I guess that's a very perspective from China. Or maybe you've seen another question that you are even more interested in, Sename. You are muted.
I think the question is if it is possible to sustain the social and economical growth.
Or the family structure, given that it's going to grow in population and grow in economic activity, the social structure that you know is valuable. Do you think it's possible to maintain them?
Yes, the population growth itself, it is not, in the history was not a big deal. The growth of the population in Africa is an opportunity. If Africans are well educated, it can be a big opportunity, and then Africans can take the lead by using this extraordinary demography we will have in the few next year. But it is a question of vision, education, etc. If we didn't have a very good vision with this demography, and we didn't educate well people, it can become a problem, but not a problem only for Africa. It will become a global problem for the humanity, because again, 1 human on 4 will be in these continents, and everything African people will decide tomorrow will have a global impact on the world. But what is the first problem of this continent is that this continent didn't have his autonomy, is still seen like a territory of exploitation, and you have a lot of interest all over the world who do everything they can to avoid that African be autonomous and decided from themselves and have good vision for the future, because they see this revolution as something who can challenge their interests and the way that they use this continent to make a lot of money. But it is not a good strategy. It can become a big problem if those imperialist company, those imperialist political interests didn't change their strategy and continue to see this continent like as only a place people can come and take money, take resources, using the demography as just a territory of data extractivism, etc., etc. So, but we can't, as African, rely on the capacity to those people have to understand that we need to change the relation to Africa, and Africans itself themselves have to make the revolution to begin to have their own agenda and begin to build a good future for this continent and a good future for the world. So you have right now a big confrontation between African good leaders, African visionary who understand all this and try to develop project for the future, and old way of seeing business from the West who don't want those space of building, of reflection to this good future to emerge. So it is the confrontation we have right now, and if it is the visionary, the good leader, African leader who win this confrontation, we can assume that the future we'll have tomorrow will be better, not only for Africans, but for all the humanity.
I want to ask, do you think that education is very important in helping to solve the, like perhaps the current socio-economic problems in Africa, like how they can confront the challenges from other countries or help themselves to build a better future?
I'm not sure.
I think you already sort of answered the question. You mentioned that you think that education is the most important. Maybe I'll try to translate the question, if I may. What do you think specifically makes, what would be the most valuable education we can give today to the children in Togo, so that they become the innovators? Like, what are the specific characteristics of that education that is different from the education that we give now? I'm trying to translate. I don't know if I'm doing a good work, but that's how I would understand the question.
When we're talking about education, is not only for kids or for children, it's also for our policymaker we have today who take action that can have impact of the future. And the characteristic of this education should be we need to shift the paradigm, because the West paradigm, the paradigm of the profit, the paradigm of the capitalism paradigm is right now a global paradigm, because this paradigm win everywhere. And even in Africa, our paradigm is now to make profits. Everything is valuable if it leads to profits. So you can have accountability for everything. But if we can shift this paradigm and have a new paradigm which is not directly connected to the profits, we can regenerate architecture, technology, etc., by developing new products who don't have the contract to make money, but to address the issue we have today. So, and we have those type of potential narrative resources, intellectual resources in our traditional, what I call cosmogony, the way people in Africa, but not only in Africa, all the traditional societies in the world have this tool you call cosmogony. And the cosmogony is a sort of big contract, a meta narrative who have the function to articulate ideally the social structure of humans in the structure of the biospherical structure, so that any activity the humans developed didn't have to, in a way or another, create problem to the biospherical structure. And if we find a way in the education to make sexy cosmogony and adapt them to the challenge we have today, which is not only to articulate two levels of structure, social and biospherical, but also technology. Technology should be way better articulated in social structure, and social structure should be better articulated in environment, natural environment. So we need to develop new cosmogony, new fiction, futuristical fiction, who see everything as globality, and any of those three levels didn't create problem with the others level. If we build this new paradigm and it's become a contract, everybody agree to sign and use it in architecture, in technology, in the way we produce politics, the way we produce law, etc. It can be the biggest revolution we could launch. And again, I think Africa have more potential to initiate this revolution because cosmogony are a little bit still strong. They will not stay strong for a long time because of the demography, the population growth, and the pressure the capitalist paradigm, make to this demography. But the demography itself can be a good thing and an extraordinary potential if it's we use it as a tool to disseminate a new paradigm. And so in a way, the challenge we are facing is the capacity the humanity have today to shift from the paradigm of profit to a paradigm who is not connected directly to the profit, but are sensible of new way of accountability. Because today, everything you develop in a design school, in an architectural school, your teacher will give you a good appreciation if what you develop is good for the market. If your architecture will be sell, you have a very high notation. If it is a good, it is a device who can tackle the market, your teacher will give you a good appreciation. But if you have a new way of appreciation in design school, in innovation laboratory, etc., not focused on money, but on the capacity your product, your architecture have to, didn't create any problem not only in your geography, but in others' geography, didn't affect any social link, etc., etc., you will see that you will launch a new area of production with better devices, better architecture, etc.
Thank you very much. I've added in the chat some links to the definition of cosmogony, because I think a lot of the students are not very familiar with this. So I'll explain to the students afterwards. You've done an amazing presentation in French. Maybe I'll try to translate some of the content. We have time for one very last question for Raefer, and then we don't want to take too much of your time. So maybe from the students.
Maybe just tagging along with what Sename was saying a moment ago.
Yes.
It's working from two different extremes where we without question need a different definition of success. Success right now is defined on financial success. We need to create a new paradigm. We need a new definition of what success means without question. A huge responsibility of that goes to architects, because architects are eternal optimists, right? No matter how black it gets, we'll still be looking for the white. And defining what that view of success is and feeding it. You know, the example I always give to my kids is, you know, we read Jules Verne, and people say, my God, Jules Verne, he could see into the future. It's unbelievable. He could see 200 years. No, he didn't. He just created a vision that a whole bunch of kids were like, got excited about that vision and built that vision, right? So he created a vision that a whole bunch of little engineers and architects then figured out how to get to the moon, figured out how to do 20,000 leagues under the sea, figured out how to, you know, you create that vision and people work towards that vision. So creating that paradigm is super important. The problem is, how do we get there in the short term? And what we've been doing, because at the other end of the spectrum, you know, I'm sort of a grassroots architect who now works with large corporates, has been to frame things in the language that they know, right? Where when I speak to C-suite, to CEO, COO, and so on at Starbucks and all these places, they understand things in financial metrics. It's no problem. I'm not going to try to retrain them in something else. I'll just explain my world in their world, right? So when we look at performance targets and standards and things like this, which are goal setting, we say, look, I'm going to get you to circularity, and I'm going to get you to 50% circularity. I will get you to a health level of suddenly I'm speaking in things that they understand. And when I do that, then I get the response I'm looking for. It's like, oh, I suddenly understand what you're talking about with green bill. Okay, 50%, can we do 60% next year? Like that's the automatic human response, right? So what we've been doing is going in the other direction of how do we translate what we're doing into the language of what's currently defined as success, as a short-term way of really starting to create change. And that's been really, really effective at quantifying the impact of what we're doing, not just financially, but in terms of circularity, hard metrics, carbon, hard metric, health, hard metrics, taking very complex data and simplifying it into a soundbite that my mom can understand, that the average person coming in to buy a coffee can understand, and that the C-suite level person can understand as well. And that's again where I think architects play a very important role at taking complex things and synthesizing them into simple ideas that the average person can understand, being that orchestra director. So long term, if we're thinking out, we need that new paradigm. It's going to take us several decades to get there, and I'd love to learn more from Africa all day long. And I'm there, I'm watching. Short term is how do we take the current definition of success, use that language to introduce the other metrics that are equally important. And the last sentence I'll say there, COVID has shown, I'm a huge fan of COVID. I know that's not politically correct to say, but it's shown the world how fragile we are, and that you cannot thrive as any economy, doesn't matter what economy you are, You cannot thrive if you have social instability. You just can't. And so suddenly the whole world has realized, oh my God, when anything comes along that wreaks havoc on social instability, the economy is gone. So suddenly everyone's worried, like, what else could cause havoc? Climate change, all these other issues. So these issues that were fringe are now center to the same conversation about profit, which is, wait, climate can disrupt us. We just saw with COVID what that can do, and COVID's really just climate change in baby diapers. And so that's created a huge opening in our conversation to bring in these other factors where it's like, look, you need to tackle circularity because that's going to affect that's going to affect the financial metrics. You need to tackle and people didn't understand that pre-COVID. Now they see them completely related. And they're very open to these discussions. The Starbucks example I gave, having that conversation 2 years ago, very hard. Having that conversation today, doable, because of these type of fundamental disruptions that are happening globally, which give us a really amazing window of opportunity to introduce these other goals, as long as we can translate them into a language that others understand. And for us, that's been the language of metrics.
Thanks so much. You want to, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say as well, like I know this is a little bit long, but on the topic of globalization and things like LEAD, just globalization is inevitable. We live on one planet. It needs to happen. Like, we need to be talking to each other. End of story. So globalization, yes, all day long. Just how? And this is the paradigm that's been happening. Anybody who knows me knows that I'm not a fan of LEED. I really am not, because it will tell buildings, oh, you must have this type of mechanical system in your building to operate a green building. Doesn't matter whether you're in Africa or you're in Sri Lanka or you're in Beijing, it's all the same building, right? That's a prescription approach to design, which as I said, I hate with a passion. Instead, it should be things like everybody needs to have clean air. Air should not be above PM 2.5, 2.5. End of story. How you get to that in Sri Lanka and in Togo and in Beijing, totally different, right?
Yes.
So you get a globalization approach, which is set on a performance. We want a better life. Let's set that as the performance, but let's leave it to the local areas to figure out how they get there best by themselves. And that's where we get a good mix of globalization, which is performance setting, essentially. We want a good life, we want a healthy life, but leave it to the local innovation to make it happen. That cannot happen with any type of prescription. It never will. It can only happen with performance base, right? Goal setting, and let people innovate to get there, which is again why I'm very much not a fan of LEED, because it's old school, it's prescriptive, and we need to get as far away from that as humanly possible if we're going to succeed.
Thanks so much. Do you want to have a very short last response to this, Sename, or?
No, you're just
No?
saying that I'm also a big fan of COVID.
A lot of people did not expect a lot of African countries to respond and be so resilient to COVID. A lot of people saying, oh my God, like China is like breaking down. America is breaking down. Imagine in Africa where they don't have like as many hospitals and as many, it's going to be terrible. And it turns out that it didn't turn out as expected. How do you explain that?
Because we still have a social structure. We don't live like individuals. We are not isolated. So when those big road, the connection with the global city was shut, people find the capacity in their proximity to create connection, help each other, etc. And so that mitigates a lot the impact this crisis have in Africa.
Right. It's been over an hour we have you, so I'm really, really grateful for the time that you share with the students. I'm sorry for the student. There's a lot of questions that they've asked that are not answered. If that's okay, I'll try to compile them, or the students can also reach out to you, I guess, on your website or something like this. Thank you so much for your time. Really, really appreciate your perspective, and I would definitely put you, the two of you guys, in touch if you want to continue this conversation. I think there's a lot of material to discuss.
Pleasure.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Caesar. Thanks to the students as well.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks,
Thanks a lot,
Sename.
Sename.